Welcome to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. Like any good marriage, we will debate, evaluate, and sometimes quarrel about how privacy and security impact business in the 21st century.
Hi, Jody Daniels here. I'm the founder and CEO of Red Clover Advisors, a certified women's privacy consultancy. I'm a privacy consultant and certified informational privacy professional and provide practical privacy advice to overwhelmed companies.
Hello, Justin Daniels here. I am a technology attorney who is passionate about helping companies solve complex cyber and privacy challenges during the life cycle of their business. I am the cyber quarterback, helping clients design and implement cyber plans, as well as help them manage and recover from data breaches.
And this episode is brought to you by... Oh, I get more than a drum roll these days. How fascinating. Red Clover Advisors. We help companies to comply with private data privacy laws and establish customer trust so that they can grow and nurture integrity. We work with companies in a variety of fields, including technology, SaaS, e-commerce, media, agencies, and professional and financial services. In short, we use data privacy to transform the way companies do business. Together, we're creating a future where there's greater trust between companies and consumers. To learn more, visit redcloveradvisors.com. So today is going to be super fun. We're going to combine what I used to watch as a kid, like the Jetsons, with your favorite topic of autonomous vehicles, because today we have a very special guest. We have Andrea Amico, who is the founder of Privacy4Cars, the first company focused on solving the growing data privacy and security issues posed by vehicles. Through its unique platform, Privacy4Cars is increasingly convincing auto finance, fleets, and dealerships to put in place sensible protection for consumers. Privacy4Cars also offers free help to consumers who want to get their data deleted and privacy respected by asserting their legal rights. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jody, and thank you, Justin. I'm excited to be here.
Well, would you like to kick us off?
I would first like to know what you guys think about the changing leaves. At least where we live, the leaves are finally changing to a nice golden brown.
Well, I might need some automated car help because I'm so focused on the beautiful colors that I might be slightly distracted while driving my car. So I need all of my bells and whistles actually in my car we're going to talk about to help keep me safe so I can enjoy all the beautiful orange, yellow, and red leaves.
So you already want a new car that has semi-autonomous mode.
I might need
already.
One. All right. Well, are you really going to start it now?
Let's get started. Andrea, welcome to the fun. Why don't we start? How did your career evolve to your current position, hanging out with us and talking about privacy and automobiles?
Well, that's really the pinnacle of my career, to be able to hang out with you guys. This is, the fact that you make it fun and that you talk about privacy and security is absolutely awesome. So I'm super elated to be here. About me, I've been in the automotive industry for more than a decade. One of the companies I used to run was actually a used car inspection company. And that's how I caught the bug of what data is left in cars, because we were doing audits and we started to realize years ago that, hold on a second, people leave their home address and garage their codes in cars have been resold. Is that a good idea? And when we asked people in the industry, nobody had a clue, meaning we all had the anecdotes of people saying, yeah, I noticed this in a car for sale, or all of us had the experience of renting a car. There's 10 other phones synced into it. But nobody really had any data to say what data is collected by cars, what's happening with this data, who has rights to it, how often does it happen? Is it the same if it's a rent or if it's a fleet or if it's a lease, or if your vehicle has been repossessed or it's a total loss because you got into an accident? So that's how I got started. And, there we go. Now we're having fun with Privacy4Cars.
It's so interesting. I actually got my start in privacy when I was working at Cox Automotive, which is a conglomerate of everything automotive from, they call it cradle to grave. And you're talking about the data that's being left in cars. Well, at the auctions, the type of info or stuff that was left in cars was fascinating. And they'd literally, when cars would get turned in, they'd uncover, strollers and all kinds of personal information, wallets, and just like you had shared, home addresses and all types of information. It's really, really interesting, which kind of lends us help educate, because I don't think everyone appreciates and realizes how much data are created from cars today. So help us understand a little bit what kind of data cars are creating, how much data are in these cars, and where do you think it's going to go in the next couple of years?
Well, I can definitely answer the last part first, because we do audits and every year the audits get worse, meaning a higher percentage of vehicles are resold containing personal information. And the average amount of personal information is growing over time because of two reasons. One, technology is evolving in cars at a very fast pace. And so all these new sensors capture extra data. But also, people use more those systems. I'm sure that if you were one of those people who had a GPS and a navigation system, the first ones came out, I think, 23 years ago. Back then, they were not real pretty. Nowadays, they are basically a glorified iPad, and they're really fun to interact with, and they give you all sorts of information. So people use them. And as a consequence, they leave a lot of information behind. Bluetooth is also 20 years old. People don't realize that. Really, the problem of data in cars started back then, because when you sync your phone, most people don't realize that actually the way systems have been designed is that your phone will dump data into the car, and then the car reads it from the car, not from your phone. And so there's always a copy of what's in your phone that is resident in the car. And so, the things that I think people probably intuitively think about is, okay, maybe there's a copy of my contacts, but there's a lot more. You can find, in old vehicles, it was very common to have the contacts, a copy of the text messages, like the actual text of the text messages. Of course, your call logs, all sorts of identifiers that makes it easy to know who was driving this car. Was it Justin? Because now I have your unique identifier. Nowadays, you have track records of your Twitter and Facebook account. They may be in your car. Your browser history may be in your car. Your calendar entries may be in your car. If you've taken photos with your phone, there's a track record in your car there too. So again, all sorts of things that people really don't realize. And I don't think they're really properly disclosed to consumers, which is part of the reason why we exist.
It sounds to me like we could have a day soon where you have a lawyer subpoenaing records to figure out where the husband was going if he was hanging out with somebody other than her girlfriend.
Well, that's already happening, unfortunately. so fun story, right? Because you're the lawyer here. So there's one special computer in the cars called the electronic data recorder. People nickname it, the black box, because it's similar to the black box of planes. And that's used for accident reconstruction. So you get into an accident, the last few seconds before and the last few seconds after the impact, all sorts of data is recorded. It's typically, pretty boring data, meaning it's your acceleration, what gear you were in, were your seatbelts on, did the airbags fire, and what time did they fire, all these kind of things. Well, that data, which is highly technical and used for accident reconstruction, is actually protected by a law called the Driver Privacy Act. That is the only computer that actually has some legal protections, meaning that the owner has the rights to say no, and you need a warrant to be able to access the data. If to know who you called, how long you were on the phone, and what you were texting, that data is stored typically in the infotainment system. So it's not covered. So you have no legal rights to that. You have no legal protections. Kind of interesting, right?
It is very interesting. It reminds me of a conversation we were having as a family with our youngest, and she didn't like the idea that the car knew every place we were going. She didn't like the idea of the tracking that was taking place in a car and the GPS. And so we had an entire conversation of, she started asking, whose data is it? And it's a really fascinating question. Is it the driver's data? Is it the people who sold us the car, the dealer? Is it the manufacturer? And we had to explain all these different people. It's actually a really complex question, because you have some data that wants to get back to a manufacturer for recall purposes. Dealers want to have that information to be able to contact you. And then it's this kind of data that we're talking about actually in the car. So it's a very fascinating and very complex answer, to which she didn't really like any of our answers. And she felt like it should be her data. So the young generation focus group of 1 feels like it is her data that she should be able to be in control of.
How old is she?
She is 8.
She's a bright young lady. I wish more people would think about this. So today, fun fact, we track over 500 companies that actually collect, share, and sell the data that originated in your car. So it's a huge ecosystem. And I bet I'm just scratching the surface. I'm sure if we were to do this podcast a year from now, we'll be well more of over 1,000. I mean, every day we find new companies that sell and trade this data, and consumers have, by and large, no idea.
So on that note, why don't you tell us a little bit more about Privacy4Cars? What services do you provide?
Yeah, so again, we started with a very simple idea. This was really not meant to be a business. I stumbled upon the fact that people left data, and I thought that wasn't right. And so the idea was always, how do we help consumers taking care of that? And when we started to talk to companies, the first reaction they had was, well, the problem is that there's so many different systems, and there are literally tens of thousands of variations of systems out there that collect data from cars. But so since they said, well, it's too complex, then we don't have to do anything about it, right? And that didn't seem like the right answer. And if there's something that motivates me, is when somebody tells me that something is impossible to do. And so we started to literally boil the ocean, try to figure out what are all the systems out there, how they work, what data they collect, and how to get rid of it. And today we work with, we give services for free to consumers. As you mentioned in the intro, if you don't know how to delete the data from your cars, download our app. It's free and you can figure it out by yourself. It's really easy. You can do it in less than a minute typically. If you are worried about which companies have access to your data and you want to tell them to stop, when you can place a request with us and we'll take care of it again free of charge. It's a service we're beta testing now. But we mainly work with companies. Some of them actually you mentioned, Jody, at the beginning of the call. And we work with banks, fleets, increasingly dealerships nowadays. And we help them, first of all, raise awareness over the fact that their vehicles contain data of their customers. And we help them create processes around that on how to secure the data, how to delete it, how to properly dispose of it, and build compliance records around that so that they can prove to consumers that they're doing the right thing.
With so many of the different laws that are currently coming on, right? We have California, we have Virginia, Colorado. You mentioned that the kind of black box of the vehicle has a particular law, the Driver's Privacy Act. Where do you see any of the law or protections coming for this type of data? I mean, you would think some of that might be covered from these other privacy laws, but it might be it might be different. I know, Justin, you've worked with autonomous vehicles and there's all kinds of other constituents that are part of it, but I'm just kind of curious for your thoughts on where and how the law might catch up with the type of data that is being collected and where we're going.
Yeah, so we have a very unique perspective on this. And the reason is because cars are very special. Cars are, first of all, an IoT, right? So they collect a lot of data. So beyond the usual privacy laws that everybody talks about that you just mentioned, right? There's actually a ton of laws out there that regulate data security of data stored in electronic devices. Well, cars are it. Again, those laws were not written for cars, but they surely apply to cars. There's laws about data breaches. There's laws about biometrics. The most litigated law on the land right now is BIPA in Illinois. Guess what? Your cars collect, biometrics. So reality is right now we track over 200 laws that at the state level that apply to vehicles. None of those laws were specifically written to vehicles, but that's not uncommon, right? For laws to be written about electronic data and electronic devices, I think it will be really hard to say that they do not apply to vehicles. And then there's some specific sectors that have special regulations. So for instance, insurance companies, they have a set of laws that are written by the National Association of Insurance Commissioners. Well, there's a data privacy law that applies to 11 states, and there's a data security law that applies to 33 states. Most companies have no idea. So, companies themselves, they have no idea how broad the law landscape is. And that's problematic per se, because if the companies are not thinking about it, you can bet that there are no protections for consumers on that.
You're thinking?
No, I'm well, yes, I'm thinking. You're thinking. You have your thinking look on. I know you want to talk autonomous vehicles. I set the stage for you. You're so excited for your autonomous vehicles.
I think as important as autonomous vehicles are, I'm stunned by the amount of data that gets collected. And I guess a follow-up question I have is, you talked about earlier with navigation systems. So now not only does the vehicle come with a navigation system, but you have Apple CarPlay, which means if you want to go to, Google Maps, what have you, you can do that. And I learned the hard way, and I'd love to get your thoughts on this, that even if I put the privacy settings on my phone, so Google Maps wouldn't be on unless I wanted directions, it really didn't matter because the navigation system built into my car had all of the data anyway. So no matter what I do, if I care about privacy, Andrea, what can I do? I feel like I'm kind of stuck because of that navigation system on my car.
You are kind of stuck, but let's talk about a couple of things, right? So first of all, a myth I want to dispel. I talk often to consumers, say, well, I don't use the navigation in the car. I use, just like I heard, right? I use my phone to navigate. Well, tough luck, because those sensors are still on. They're still dropping a breadcrumb into your system, typically every 1 to 3 seconds. And they store this data for a very long amount of time. So reality is that everywhere you go in your car is still logged locally. And then if your car is connected through telematics, it's pushed out to a bunch of companies. On Apple CarPlay, so interesting factoid that you may like. When we reached out to Apple, so we know that when you connect your phone, when you plug your phone in the USB port, a couple of things happen, right? One is that, again, data will migrate from your phone into the car. And so now your car knows stuff about your phone. But if you have Android Auto or Apple CarPlay, the opposite is also true, right? Your phone will suck out some data that is generated by the car and will transmit it to Android and to Apple. And so the question then becomes, okay, what data do they have? Also, we reached out to Apple, for instance, right? Very privacy-forward company. And the answer we got is, well, you can log into the dashboard of your Apple products, right? You can all do it, right? And you can see all the apps and you can query your data, et cetera. There's one problem. There is no Apple CarPlay on the list. There is no way for consumers to know what Apple has collected from the car through Apple CarPlay. And then the other thing they say is, well, just check our privacy policy. Other problem. There's no section in the privacy policy that says what data is collected by Apple CarPlay. So even with the most privacy-forward companies like Apple, this is extremely murky. And that's the very best case that you're dealing with. Everything else is, much more in the darker shades of gray, as you can imagine. Back to your question, what can you do? Well, you have very limited tools, but you can use your local laws to try to ask companies to apply those laws to you. And that's, for instance, what we're offering, for free to consumers. So you can place a data request and we'll try to figure out what laws apply, what systems and what companies are collecting data from your car, and then we'll place a request. We act as your agent and we'll say, hey, Jody requested that, her data is not to be sold. Tell us if you're selling the data, what categories of data do you have? And by and large, most companies even don't know how to respond because they've never received a request before. But I think it's very healthy for consumers to be involved and ask these kind of questions, because otherwise, how do you get the change that you want to see in society?
You shared that it sounds like hundreds of companies kind of on the back end collecting, using, sharing all this information. What would be some of the examples that people would find very surprising?
So I think most people understand, okay, if I punch in a destination in my navigation, probably my manufacturer will know where I am and where I'm going because they need to provide directions, right? It's really hard to do if you don't know where you are and where you're going. So the answer is yes, of course, your manufacturer knows. But then typically, we call them manufacturers, but they really are assemblers. They put stuff together made by other companies. So there's going to be a company that will provide the mapping system. Well, they also get to collect where you are and where you're going. If you get traffic notifications, they may come from a different company altogether. So they also need to know where you are and where you're going. You may get weather notification. You may get, points of interest. You may be able nowadays you can buy your favorite drink from your car. And so all these companies, they have the rights to this information. And many of them have the ability to further share, sell it, broker it. And then there's giant data aggregators. They collect all this data from all these sources, package it nicely, and sell it. So, I can go and buy probably your car data for just a few dollars.
So I guess a follow-up question to ask you is, in the last 2 years, Jody and I bought new cars. We have his and her Kia Tellurides. And so we went through the process and, we bought the car from Kia. And from what you're saying is, I don't have a direct contract with the people who designed the mapping system. I don't have a direct contract with the people who put so much of the technology in the car. I just have an agreement with Kia that I bought the car. Mm-hmm. So basically what you're saying is there's all these agreements behind the scenes between Kia Automotive and all the suppliers of the technology that go in the car as to what they're doing with the data. And as a consumer, it wasn't explained to me in the sales process. I know nothing about it, yet it's going on behind the scenes. And what you're saying is, obviously, it's big business. Is my understanding accurate?
It is very accurate. So we have reviewed the privacy policy of 40 different makes. And by and large, they all say the same thing, right? When you go to the dealership and you sign on that dotted line, somewhere in that contract it says that you're agreeing to the privacy policy. Okay, this is not any different when you download an app and you click OK, right? It's the same thing. People don't read what's happening, but that's essentially what's happening. So when you sign the contract, you're agreeing to the privacy policy of the manufacturer. What those typically say is that any data collected by the car they have the rights to it, they have the rights to share it, they have the rights to use it. And typically, they explain the uses of the data as, we use this data to improve the safety of your vehicle. We use it for research. We use it to deliver services you ask for. And then typically says, or any other purposes, which essentially means, we can do whatever we want with it. And actually, most manufacturers have a 20-year retention policy. So 20 years from now, if you don't know where you were today, call your manufacturer, because chances are there's a blue dot somewhere on a map that says exactly where you were.
I can imagine you're very popular at a cocktail party.
I'm the most fun, I promise you.
I'm sure. And people probably ask you all kinds of information. And if you were there, what would be the couple tips you would give someone to help make sure that they're aware of what's happening and what control they might be able to offer?
Well, I'm a very pragmatic person, right? So let's start with the simple stuff. The data that is stored in the vehicle is the easiest place where you can make some significant process because it's stored locally. And also it's a place where you should really think about, because if you're selling that vehicle, that data goes to the new owner and actually anybody in that chain, right? As you know, many people will touch that car before it actually finds a new owner. And since there's no PIN, there's no face recognition, there's no fingerprinting cars, right? But your factor authentication is the keys. So anybody with the keys has access to all this data, and it's very easy to extract a lot of data. So make sure that if you're selling your car, you're trading in a vehicle, you're returning a rental, delete your data. It's just really good hygiene. It's like washing your hands. You should do it every single time. The next thing you should do is go and ask the companies that actually touch your vehicle to do the same, because I don't think it's fundamentally fair that consumers are burdened with something that is, quite frankly, pretty technical and pretty complex. And it's just, difficult. In fact, we know that today in the United States, more than 4 out of 5 cars are resold while still containing the personal information of the previous owner. So, that clearly tells you people don't do it, but also dealerships don't do it, and auto finance companies don't do it, and insurance companies don't do it. And I think it's important for consumers to ask for it. Now, if you buy a used car, you should be concerned about finding people's data too. And you may think, why do I care? Well, just the past week, 2 incidents were reported to me of 2 different vehicles in which the old owner had tethered their phone to the car, right? Because nowadays cars come with an app, which sounds really a lot of fun, in the middle of the winter to say, I'm gonna turn on the engine from my room so that the car warms up 5 minutes before I get into it and it's not really cold. That's awesome. But if you sell your car, or if you bought a car used and somebody still has the hands on the remote and can locate it, unlock it, and start it, as again, in these 2 instances in just 1 week have been reported to me, that's problematic. And that's where the slope from this is a privacy problem to a security problem to a safety problem, that becomes really steep really fast. And so again, I really think that hopefully your audience will think about these kind of things and will start asking, as a business, as a dealership, are you taking care of my data? And I think they should.
I'm so curious in that example, because what comes to mind is that it feels like a design flaw with that app and the ability to transfer ownership. I know that you work with a lot of companies. Is that one of the topics that they're starting to address in the design process?
Well, yes and no. So we did a benchmark so I discovered this by pure chance by renting a car, right? So I synced my app on the car, and then I realized after the rental, hold on a second, it can still follow where the car goes. And so for months, we watched it going, from Connecticut, we originally rented it all the way up to Maine over, 2.5 months. We contacted the manufacturer. They were actually really kind in that case to have a workshop with their connected car team. And they didn't follow all of our recommendations, but at least they tried to make some changes, which is encouraging. The rental company never responded to us. So, I cannot say as many good things in that case. But then we did the same for, 15, 16 manufacturer, I think. And essentially they all had the same problem. Typically, all it takes to be able to take over a vehicle is to have a little bit of ingenuity and at most a little bit of social engineering. And it's really not that hard. And that hasn't changed. In fact, when we disclose it, most manufacturers never gave us a response back. We disclose it through the Auto ISAC, which is a wonderful organization, by the way. If you ever find something, please say something to the Auto ISAC. But a couple of manufacturers got back to us and said, well, if somebody did that, there will be a breach of the terms. And I thought, wow, now the safety, the physical safety of consumers is protected by this giant wall called the terms of service, and hoping that nobody ill intention will actually breach them. That doesn't sound quite right, does it? I see you snickering on the other side.
I'm a little bit louder snickering. He was a quiet snicker.
No, but I mean, this is serious stuff, right? Because this is becoming really common with vehicles. Most vehicles that come out of factories nowadays have these systems, they have these services, and they are all awesome, right? They provide great convenience. But to say that privacy and security has been an afterthought, I don't think is quite cutting it right. It's just not a really good situation. And I think until consumers start to ask, what are you doing? What are the incentives for companies to actually do something? Either there's going to be a mandate because something ugly is going to happen. I hope that's not the case. I hope we can all have a little bit of, prevention rather than fixing bad things from happening because they have happened before. But reality, right now, there's a court in the cases of San Francisco it's a terrible case of domestic abuse. An OEM is named in the lawsuit because of this kind of situation, because the abuser allegedly used the connection to the car to physically harm his ex-wife. And I think we just need to be really thoughtful about these kind of things.
This is great because you've hit on a theme of, I think, our entire show. When you say, everyone likes the convenience, and privacy and security don't even rise to the level of an afterthought. Because I'm listening to what you're saying about the car situation. How is that any different from the hospital that's being sued because their ransomware event, the plaintiff is asserting, led to the fact that someone had to be transported to another hospital where they passed away en route because the hospital had been ransomwared? So now you're into a very life-threatening situation similar to what you're saying. And yet, I guess, Andrea, I'm asking you, just taking what you see in the auto industry, what are your thoughts around why consumers are just so seemingly unaware or not thinking about how privacy and security from their Apple to their car to their Siri, Alexa, it just isn't really registering?
Okay. I don't have really a study. I can tell you anecdotally, most people do not think of their car as if they do with their cell phone, right? I have a special drawer in my house where I have all my old laptops and all my old devices, smartphones, because even though in theory I could delete the data, I just don't trust it, and I'd rather keep them there or physically destroy them than do anything. None of us has the luxury of having a special garage where we keep our old cars from this happening. It's just not real, guys. Cars are just too valuable. You can't do that, right? And so, but at the same token, if you go to Best Buy or your favorite electronic retailer and you bring back your laptop or you have it remanufactured, they have decided years ago that they're going to be cleaning up that device before they put it back in commerce. Probably because they didn't used to do so. And then when stuff got back into commerce, bad things happen, right? Same thing with the phones. If you bring your phone back to Verizon, AT&T, whoever you use, at their store, they'll either delete the data or they'll tell you how to do it. Why we don't do this for cars? It just baffles me because it's the same thing. In fact, cars have more sensors than the average smartphone nowadays.
How many sensors are up in a car these days?
Oh, plenty. I mean, essentially in a phone, you have, gyroscopes and a GPS unit, and, you have cameras and light sensors, etc. All of this stuff you have in cars, plus a bunch of other things, right? And they also tend to be a lot more precise because, well, your car wouldn't run as efficiently or would be able to deliver these advanced features that you have in cars nowadays, right? And so cars have outward cameras and inward cameras. Like, people have no idea that cars have inward cameras. That's shocking to me. And reality is that they're designed to be hidden behind the dashboard. So there's no pinhole, like and there's no red light flashing say, hey, I'm recording you, right? So people drive and they have no idea that anything from their, where their eyes are looking to the, where their face is being recognized. Nowadays, the leading manufacturer of these systems have acquired 2 companies that specialize in emotion detection. In other words, the way where this is going is that manufacturers want to figure out, are you hungry? Because I know what your favorite fast food place is, and I can recommend to put it on your route. Now, this creates a host of other problems because you get into an accident and the AI of the car determined you were angry. Maybe you were just a minority and the AI didn't work quite as well, as we know that there's some systematic bias issues in all these systems. What's going to happen then? I think that's that's a question I really don't want to see what the answer really is, but probably we're going to have to subpoena and put on the stand OEMs to say, tell me what your AI does again before we send somebody to jail.
So when you're not busy navigating privacy and connected cars, what do you like to do for fun? Maybe you like to race antique cars.
I should pick up on the antique car so there wouldn't be any system, but then where would be the fun here? Now, I have 2 little girls, and you guys were talking about the leaves turning, and just this past week we took a very long drive and we went up in the mountains and we went fishing, and spending time with my girls is the best time outside of work that I can possibly spend. And if there are any parents on the audience, I'm sure that they feel exactly the same way.
Our dog does.
I hope no one could hear that, but it was very amusing.
By the way, great parenting tip. I taught my daughter when she was 8, so this is 2 years ago, how to hack into mom's car to extract her text messages and read her text messages. I think it's awesome parenting. And so if anybody wants tips, just send me a line and contact us through our website, and I'm happy to teach your kids as well.
Well, on that theme, was going to ask, how can people connect with you and where should they go to learn more as a consumer to make sure that they know how to properly delete their data?
Oh, cool. Thank you. So, you can go to privacy4cars.com. It's spelled privacy number 4 cars, just one word, .com. And you can also type in the same word, Privacy4Cars, into your Google Play or iTunes to download your app store to download our app for free. And if you go on the website, the top right link right now, we are, again, beta testing the service to help you figure out who has your data and how to tell them to stop. And so please file a request. We'd love to be able to help.
Wonderful. Well, I know I've learned a lot during our time here together, and I'm sure many others will as well. So thank you so much for sharing and scaring all of us about what our cars are collecting and doing, but empowering everyone here to be able to take control.
Well, thank you for the opportunity. I really don't want to scare anybody, but I think as with everything, and I listen to your podcast, and you're doing a great job at educating the public about what are some real risks out there. And reality is that raising awareness makes all of us safer. So again, thank you for giving me the opportunity to be here today.
It is our pleasure.
Thank you. I enjoyed it. We didn't even talk about autonomous vehicles.
Didn't. I hinted. Next time, we'll come back. Thank you so much.
Thanks for listening to the She Said Privacy, He Said Security podcast. If you haven't already, be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes and check us out on LinkedIn. See you next time.